Jane Bevan is a UNICEF water sanitation and hygiene specialist in West and Central Africa. On a visit to UNICEF UK in July 2011, I spoke to her about the difference that having clean water and toilets can make to children.
If you haven't got access to enough safe water and you haven't got access to sanitation, quite often, kids can get very sick very quickly. It's really a problem because many kids, because of the compounding effects of malnutrition, get intestinal worms, get sick, get diarrhea. They never reach their full potential, they never grow, so many children are stunted, many are malnourished, and many miss many school days, for example, and of course many die.
In your experience, what are the biggest barriers to children's access to safe water and sanitation?
Well, I think, as I said, it's a cultural norm in most countries, especially in West Africa, which is predominantly a rural population. More people live in the countryside than not. Open defecation is the norm, so people go in the bush, and that's what they've always done, and they don't see anything wrong with that. And it's what some of our projects are trying to do through community-led total sanitation is to change that behaviour to being no longer acceptable. It's done quite effectively through a facilitation process of actually taking people on a walk to look at where they go and to show it off to outsiders, which is always a bit embarrassing. But usually it's the disgust people realise, because quite often what we do is pick up a sample, bring it back to a meeting, ask for some food, and we put the feces next to the food, and the flies do their work, and people work it out for themselves how unhygienic this is, and basically, as long as one person is open defecating in that village, there's the possibility that your children can get sick. So what we aim to achieve is a community consensus that everybody will stop open defecation. And when it happens very, very quickly. And it can happen overnight. And people agree a date, usually like a few weeks or a month or two at the most, where at that time everybody will have a latrine or will be sharing a latrine. And we emphasise that it's not the quality of the latrine, it's the fact that the feces are covered and that the flies can't get to them. So it's making the barriers between people and the feces. And it's been, I call it a revolution actually, really, in sanitation. We used to just build the odd latrine, and of course some people had them and some people didn't. And as long as some people are still open defecating, there's still an issue. But now, with community-led total sanitation, we're counting communities that are open defecation free rather than numbers of latrines, and it's making a huge impact.
What makes children particularly vulnerable in emergency situations when water or safe water and sanitation facilities are scarce?
Well, I think in an emergency everything changes. I mean, all your points of reference that you knew can change. I mean, you may be moving place, or your latrine may be underwater if it's a flood, and so you don't know where to go quite often to get your water and to use the toilet. So in an emergency situation we work very quickly to get back to the status quo, as it were, so that it's very clear where you can get your water from, and it's very clear how you can treat that water to make it safe, and it's very clear that you should still be washing your hands. More so, in fact, because often in an emergency situation there's a lot of overcrowding because people are crammed into in a much smaller area. For example, earlier this year I was working in Liberia, where many refugees were coming over from Côte d'Ivoire over the border, and all along those villages in the border between on the other side in Liberia, people were doubling up and sharing their homes, and so many Côte d'Ivoirians were living in the communities in Liberia, and the villages were very, very full, and we've been working in all of those communities along the border to to improve the water supply, to improve the sanitation, and really to push the hygiene messages, because once there's overcrowding, there's much more risk of disease spreading. And I think testament to the work that UNICEF and its partners have done in Liberia is, despite that huge influx of people across the border, there have been no significant outbreaks of disease or any epidemics. So it's been a really effective campaign.
This is Isabel Andrews reporting for UNICEF Radio.